The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens as Catherine walked slowly along the stone pathway. Her fingers traced the smooth surface of the letter she had received just hours before. The royal physician's words echoed in her mind like a distant thunder. 6 months. Maybe less. The diagnosis had come as a shock to everyone, even though she had been feeling tired for weeks. William found her sitting on their favorite bench, the one overlooking the rose garden where they had shared countless quiet moments over the years. He could tell from the way her shoulders curved inward that she had already read the letter. Without saying a word, he sat beside her and gently took her hand. The silence between them spoke louder than any conversation they had ever had. Catherine had always been the strong one in their relationship. She was the one who comforted others during difficult times, who smiled through every public appearance, who never let the weight of royal duties show on her face. But now, for the first time in years, William saw vulnerability in her eyes. It was the same look she had given him on their wedding day, a mixture of love, fear, and complete trust. The palace staff continued their daily routines, unaware that the world was about to change forever. Gardeners trimmed the hedges, maids prepared the royal chambers, and security guards maintained their posts. Life moved forward as it always had, but for William and Catherine, time seemed to stand still in that garden. As the afternoon approached, they knew they would have to face reality. There would be meetings with doctors, discussions with palace officials, and eventually, the painful task of telling their children. But for now, they simply held each other's hands and watched the roses bloom, knowing that some moments are too precious to rush. Catherine finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She talked about the things she wanted to see, the places she wanted to visit one more time, and the memories she hoped to create in whatever time remained. William listened, memorizing every word, every pause, every breath. He realized that this was not just the beginning of a goodbye, but also the start of making every remaining moment count. The letter lay forgotten on the bench beside them as they made their way back to the palace. Neither of them looked back at the garden, but both knew they would return to that bench many times in the weeks ahead. It had become their sanctuary, the place where they could be just William and Catherine, not the Duke and Duchess, not the future King and Queen, but simply two people facing the most difficult journey of their lives together. That evening, as palace lights began to flicker on against the darkening sky, William and Catherine made a decision that would shape everything that followed. They would not let fear dictate their remaining time together. Instead, they would choose love, hope, and the determination to make their farewell a celebration of everything they had shared. The world did not yet know what was coming, but soon everyone would witness a love story that would touch hearts across the globe. The weeks that followed the diagnosis brought a strange mixture of normalcy and urgency to the royal household. Catherine continued her public duties, attending charity events and royal engagements with the same grace she had always shown. But those closest to her began to notice small changes. She lingered a little longer when saying goodbye to children at hospital visits. Her smiles, while still warm, carried a depth that had not been there before. William found himself watching her more carefully during these public appearances. He noticed how she would pause to really listen when people spoke to her, as if she was storing their words in her memory. During a visit to a children's hospice, he saw her spend extra time with a young girl who reminded him of Charlotte. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but the impact on both Catherine and the child was clear to everyone in the room. Behind palace walls, their private moments became more precious. Evening walks through the gardens became a daily ritual. Catherine started a journal, writing letters to their children for future birthdays, graduations, and weddings she might not be there to witness. William would often find her at her desk in the early morning hours, her pen moving slowly across the pages, sometimes pausing to wipe away tears. The children sensed that something was different, though they did not yet know the full truth. George, being the oldest, asked more questions about why their mother seemed tired so often. Charlotte became more affectionate, always wanting to sit close to Catherine during story time. Louis, still young and carefree, continued to bring laughter to the household with his playful energy, providing moments of lightness that everyone desperately needed. Doctor appointments became a regular part of their schedule, though they were arranged with the utmost secrecy. Catherine insisted on hearing every detail about her condition, asking questions that showed her determination to understand what lay ahead. William accompanied her to every appointment, taking notes and asking about treatments, always hoping for better news that never seemed to come. One particularly difficult evening, after a day filled with medical consultations, Catherine and William sat in their private sitting room, the fire crackling softly in the background. She had been quieter than usual, and William could see the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. Without warning, she broke down completely. All the strength she had been showing to the world finally giving way to the fear and sadness she had been carrying. William held her as she cried, his own tears falling silently. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, neither needing to speak. Sometimes love is expressed not in words, but in simply being present for someone when they need you most. That night they made another important decision together. They would tell the children soon in their own way, giving them time to process and ask questions before the news became public. The next morning brought renewed determination. Catherine woke with a sense of purpose that surprised even herself. She had spent the night thinking about legacy, about the mark she wanted to leave on the world, and about the love she wanted to ensure would continue long after she was gone. The farewell she was planning would not be about ending, but about celebrating everything beautiful that would remain. The conversation with their children took place on a quiet Sunday afternoon in their private quarters at Kensington Palace. Catherine had chosen the setting carefully, wanting the children to feel safe and comfortable when they heard the news that would change their young lives forever. William sat beside her on the familiar sofa, where they had shared countless family moments, bedtime stories, and lazy weekend mornings. George, at his young age, understood more than his parents had expected. His questions were thoughtful and direct, asking about treatments and whether the doctors were sure about their diagnosis. Charlotte, always sensitive to emotions around her, moved closer to her mother and held her hand tightly throughout the conversation. Louis, still too young to fully grasp the situation, seemed to understand that this was an important moment. Staying unusually quiet and attentive, Catherine spoke to them with the same honesty she had always valued in their family. She explained that she was sick, that the doctors were doing everything they could, but that the sickness was very serious. She told them that no matter what happened, the love between their family would never change or go away. William watched as she found exactly the right words to comfort their children while still preparing them for what might come. The days following that conversation brought the family closer together in ways they had never experienced before. Simple activities like baking in the palace kitchen or playing games in the garden took on new meaning. Catherine made sure to create special one-on-one time with each child, building memories that would last them a lifetime. She taught Charlotte how to braid hair, spent hours helping George with his favorite puzzles, and played endless games of hide-and-seek with Louis. William began documenting everything with his camera, capturing candid moments of laughter, quiet conversations, and the ordinary magic of their daily life. He photographed Catherine reading bedtime stories, her face glowing in the soft lamplight. He captured her dancing with Charlotte in the music room, both of them giggling as they spun around. These photographs became treasures, each one holding the essence of their love and the beauty of their time together. The palace staff, who had become like extended family over the years, began to notice the subtle changes in the household atmosphere. Meals lasted longer, with more conversation and laughter around the table. Evening routines became more relaxed, with extra time for hugs and bedtime stories. Everyone seemed to understand without being told directly that these moments needed to be savored. Catherine also began reaching out to people who had been important in her life. She called old friends, wrote heartfelt letters to mentors who had guided her, and spent long phone conversations with her parents and siblings. Each conversation was filled with gratitude, shared memories, and expressions of love that had sometimes gone unspoken in the busy rush of royal life. One evening, as William tucked the children into bed, he overheard George telling Charlotte not to be sad because their mother had taught them that love never disappears, it just changes shape. The wisdom in those young words, clearly learned from Catherine herself, reminded William of the incredible legacy she was creating not just for their family, but for everyone whose life she had touched. As the weeks passed, Catherine's strength began to fade more noticeably, but her spirit remained as bright as ever. She continued to find joy in small moments, to laugh at William's attempts to recreate her favorite recipes, and to marvel at their children's resilience and understanding. The love in their household had not diminished with the difficult news. Instead, it had grown deeper and more intentional, touching everyone who witnessed it. The decision to share Catherine's diagnosis with the public was not made lightly. After weeks of private struggle and family conversations, William and Catherine knew that the world deserved to hear the truth directly from them, rather than through speculation and rumors. They wanted to control their own narrative and use their platform to bring awareness to the illness that was affecting not just them, but countless families around the world. The announcement was carefully planned for a quiet Tuesday morning. Catherine insisted on filming the message herself, wanting people to see her strength and dignity rather than focusing on her illness. She sat in the same garden where she and William had first processed the news, the roses blooming behind her as she spoke directly to the camera with calm determination. Her words were simple but powerful. She thanked the public for their years of support, explained her diagnosis in terms that everyone could understand, and asked for privacy for her family during this difficult time. Most importantly, she used the moment to encourage others facing similar battles, reminding them that they were not alone and that hope could be found even in the darkest circumstances. The world's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from every corner of the globe. World leaders, celebrities, and ordinary people shared their own stories of loss and hope. Social media filled with photographs and memories of Catherine's years of public service, charitable work, and the grace she had shown through every challenge. The outpouring of love was unlike anything the royal family had ever experienced. William found himself reading through thousands of messages each day, many from people sharing their own experiences with similar diagnoses. Parents wrote about explaining illness to their children, inspired by the honest way William and Catherine had approached the conversation with George, Charlotte, and Louis. Healthcare workers shared stories of patients who had found strength in Catherine's example. The message had become bigger than just an announcement. It had created a global conversation about love, loss, and resilience. Catherine was deeply moved by the response, though she was also surprised by the intensity of public emotion. She had always known that people cared about the royal family, but the personal nature of the messages she received revealed how deeply her years of service had touched individual lives. Elderly women wrote about feeling like she was their own daughter. Young mothers expressed gratitude for the example she had set in balancing family and duty. Children sent drawings and letters, promising to pray for her recovery. The media coverage was respectful in a way that surprised many observers. Photographers maintained appropriate distance, allowing the family to continue their private moments without intrusion. News outlets focused on celebrating Catherine's contributions rather than speculating about her condition. The public seemed to understand that this was a time for compassion rather than curiosity. Within the palace walls, life took on a new rhythm. Catherine's energy levels fluctuated more noticeably now, requiring adjustments to their daily routines. Good days were filled with walks, family activities, and quiet celebrations. Difficult days meant rest, gentle conversations, and the comfort of being surrounded by love. William became expert at reading her needs, knowing when to encourage activity and when to simply hold her hand in comfortable silence. The children adapted to these changes with remarkable resilience. They learned to cherish the good moments without dwelling on the challenges. George became more protective of his mother and siblings, showing maturity beyond his years. Charlotte developed a talent for making her mother laugh, seeming to instinctively know when humor was needed most. Louis continued to bring spontaneous joy to every day, his innocent energy serving as a reminder that life continued to hold beauty and wonder. As autumn approached, Catherine began to speak more openly about her hopes for the future, even knowing that her own future was uncertain. She talked about the legacy she wanted to leave, the causes she hoped would continue to receive support, and the kind of world she dreamed of for her children. These conversations, though tinged with sadness, were also filled with purpose and determination. As Catherine's condition gradually worsened, she made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew her. Instead of retreating from public life, she chose to embrace it in a new way. She wanted to use her remaining time to complete one final project that would touch as many lives as possible. Working closely with her charitable foundations, she began planning a series of visits to places and people that had been meaningful to her throughout her years of service. The first stop was the Children's Hospital, where she had been a patron for nearly a decade. Walking through the familiar corridors, Catherine spent unhurried time with young patients and their families. She no longer felt the pressure to maintain a schedule or move quickly from room to room. Instead, she sat beside hospital beds, listened to stories, and shared her own experiences with facing medical challenges. Her presence brought comfort not just to the children, but to parents who saw their own fears and hopes reflected in her eyes. William accompanied her on these visits, watching as she seemed to draw strength from connecting with others who were fighting their own battles. He noticed how naturally she spoke about her illness now, using it as a bridge to reach people who felt isolated or afraid. Her honesty about the difficult days, the uncertainty, and the importance of hope resonated deeply with everyone she met. The homeless shelter where Catherine had volunteered before her marriage was her next destination. Many of the staff members remembered her from years ago, when she had quietly served meals and organized clothing drives without any media attention. Now, returning as the Duchess of Cambridge facing her own vulnerability, she found a different kind of connection with the people she served. Conversations flowed easily between someone who had experienced homelessness and someone who was facing the loss of everything she held dear. Each visit was documented not by royal photographers, but by the organizations themselves, creating authentic records of moments that felt more like reunions with old friends than formal royal engagements. Catherine's approach had shifted from performing duties to sharing experiences, and the difference was noticeable to everyone involved. At a care home for elderly residents, Catherine sat with women who reminded her of her own grandmother. Listening to stories of love, loss, and resilience that spanned decades, she found comfort in their perspectives on life's cycles, their wisdom about letting go, and their examples of finding joy even in difficult circumstances. One elderly resident, holding Catherine's hand, told her that saying goodbye was not about ending love, but about trusting it to continue in new ways. The children seemed to understand the importance of these visits, often asking about the people their mother had met and the stories she had heard. Catherine shared appropriate details with them, helping them understand that their family's experience was part of a larger human story of challenges and connection. These conversations deepened their empathy and understanding of the world beyond their privileged circumstances. William began to see these visits as Catherine's way of completing a circle that had begun years earlier. When she first committed herself to public service, she was not saying goodbye to her work, but rather bringing it to a meaningful conclusion that honored both her past efforts and her current circumstances. The authenticity of these encounters touched everyone involved, creating memories that would last far beyond any formal ceremony or official recognition. During quiet evenings at home, Catherine would tell William about the conversations that had moved her most deeply. She spoke of a young mother at the hospital who had thanked her for showing that it was possible to face illness with dignity. She described an elderly man at the care home who had shared wisdom about making peace with uncertainty. These stories became part of their own family's narrative, examples of human strength that would guide them through whatever lay ahead. As word of these visits spread through the organizations Catherine supported, requests began arriving from other charities and community groups. Everyone wanted to offer her the chance to say goodbye in person, to share one final moment of connection. The response was overwhelming, a testament to the genuine relationships she had built throughout her years of service. The spring morning arrived with unusual warmth, as if nature itself understood the significance of the day. Catherine had been planning this moment for weeks, knowing that her strength was becoming more limited and that opportunities for grand gestures were becoming fewer. She had decided to make one final public appearance, not at a formal event or ceremony, but in the place where she felt most connected to the people she had served for so many years. The location she chose was a simple community garden in London, one that had been created through a partnership between several of her charitable organizations. The garden served as a meeting place for families from diverse backgrounds, offering gardening programs for children, support groups for parents, and peaceful spaces for reflection. It represented everything Catherine had believed in throughout her public life, bringing people together, nurturing growth, and finding beauty in everyday moments. Word of her planned visit had spread quietly through social media and community networks, but there were no formal announcements or heavy security presence. Catherine wanted this to feel like a neighborhood gathering rather than a royal event. As her car pulled up to the garden's modest entrance, she could see that hundreds of people had gathered, not behind barriers or cordoned areas, but simply standing together in the garden paths, holding flowers, homemade signs, and photographs. William walked beside her as they entered the garden, his hand gently supporting her arm when the uneven ground made walking difficult. The crowd parted naturally, creating a path that led them through the garden's different sections. People reached out to touch her hand, to offer quiet words of support, to simply share a moment of connection. Catherine stopped frequently, genuinely engaging with individuals rather than moving through the crowd in the formal manner of traditional royal visits. Near the garden's central fountain, a group of children from the local primary school had prepared a special presentation. They had written poems about growth, hope, and the different seasons of life. As they recited their words, Catherine listened with complete attention, her eyes filling with tears at the innocent wisdom in their verses. When they finished, she knelt down to their level, despite the physical effort it required, and spoke to each child individually, thanking them for their gift of words and encouragement. The moment that would be remembered by everyone present came when Catherine noticed an elderly woman standing alone near the rose bushes, clearly wanting to approach but hesitant to interrupt. Catherine walked over to her, and the woman, with trembling hands, offered a single white rose from her own garden. As Catherine accepted the flower, the woman whispered something that made Catherine smile through her tears. The two women embraced, a grandmother figure and a young mother, connected by their shared understanding of love, loss, and the preciousness of time. William watched this interaction, recognizing it as the perfect embodiment of who Catherine had always been. Throughout her years in the public eye, she had possessed a rare ability to connect with people across all boundaries of age, background, and circumstance. Her illness had not diminished this gift. Instead, it had deepened her capacity for empathy and authentic human connection. As the afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows across the garden, Catherine made her way to a small wooden bench that had been dedicated in honor of community members who had passed away. She sat quietly for several minutes, holding the white rose and looking out at the faces of people who had come to support her. The silence was peaceful rather than somber, filled with the presence of shared love and mutual respect. When she finally stood to leave, the crowd began to applaud, but the sound quickly faded into something more meaningful. Instead of clapping, people began to reach out their hands toward her, a gesture that seemed to say goodbye and thank you and we love you all at once. Catherine moved through the garden one more time, touching as many outstretched hands as possible, creating a moment of connection that transcended formal protocol or royal tradition. The drive back to the palace was quiet, both Catherine and William processing the emotional intensity of what had just occurred. They both understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a farewell that was less about ending and more about celebrating the continuation of love and community that would outlast any individual life. The garden would remain. The relationships would continue, and the example of grace and compassion would inspire others long into the future. The final weeks of summer brought a sense of completion that surprised everyone in the royal household. Catherine had accomplished everything she had hoped to do, said goodbye to everyone important to her, and created memories that would sustain her family for years to come. Now, as her energy became more limited, she chose to spend her remaining time in the simple comfort of family life, surrounded by the people she loved most. The palace gardens became their world during these precious days. Catherine would sit in her favorite spot, wrapped in soft blankets, watching her children play on the lawn while William read aloud from books they had enjoyed together over the years. The sounds of laughter, conversation, and birds singing created a peaceful soundtrack to their final chapter together. Visitors were limited to immediate family and closest friends, people who understood that these moments were sacred and not to be interrupted by the demands of the outside world. George, Charlotte, and Louis had grown remarkably throughout this journey, developing wisdom and emotional strength that amazed the adults around them. They had learned to treasure quiet moments with their mother, to express their love openly, and to find comfort in each other when words were not enough. Their resilience became a source of pride for Catherine, evidence that the values she had worked to instill in them would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. On one particularly beautiful evening in late summer, Catherine gathered her family around her for a conversation she had been planning for weeks. She spoke to them about the letters she had written for their future milestones, about the love that would always connect them even when she could not be physically present, and about the importance of taking care of each other and their father. Her words were carefully chosen, offering comfort and guidance without dwelling on sadness or fear. William found himself memorizing everything during these final days. The way Catherine's face lit up when the children told her about their day. The sound of her laugh when Louis performed one of his silly dances. The peaceful expression she wore while watching the sunset from their bedroom window. He understood that these memories would become treasures, helping him find his way through the grief that lay ahead, while also celebrating the joy they had shared. The world continued to follow their story with respectful attention, understanding that they were witnessing something profound. Messages of support arrived daily, but they were set aside to be read later, allowing the family to focus completely on each other. The media maintained their distance, recognizing that some moments were too private and sacred to document, even as public interest remained intense. Catherine's final public act was a letter she dictated to William, intended to be shared after her passing. In it, she thanked the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth for their years of support and love. She spoke about the privilege it had been to serve alongside them, to learn from their examples of courage and kindness, and to be part of their communities during both celebrations and challenges. Most importantly, she asked that her memory be honored not through mourning, but through continued acts of compassion and service to others. The tender embrace that would indeed be remembered by the world came on a quiet September morning, when Catherine woke feeling weaker than she had in weeks. She called William to her bedside, and without needing to speak, they both understood that their time together was drawing to a close. He gathered the children, and they spent the morning sharing stories, expressing their love, and simply being together as a family. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of their private sitting room, Catherine rested peacefully in William's arms while their children sat close beside them. The embrace was not dramatic or performed for anyone else. It was simply the natural expression of a love that had sustained them through years of joy and months of challenge. In that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Catherine found the peace she had been seeking. The photograph that captured this final embrace was taken not by a royal photographer, but by Catherine's mother, who understood that this moment needed to be preserved for the children and for history. The image showed not the pomp and ceremony of royal life, but the simple, profound beauty of a family holding each other close in love. When it was eventually shared with the world, it became a symbol of grace, dignity, and the enduring power of love to transcend even the greatest challenges. Catherine's legacy lived on not just in the charitable organizations she had supported, or the official duties she had fulfilled, but in the example she had set of facing life's greatest difficulties with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the people she loved. The farewell the world would never forget was not about the ending of a life, but about the celebration of love that continues to inspire and comfort long after the final goodbye.